Hello, friends, and welcome back to Ambitious. I am so excited for you to listen to today's episode because I am joined by one of my dear friends, client, sister, all of the things in my life on today's episode. And we dive into a series that you really enjoyed the last time that we did it. And I was trying to think of the perfect person that I was going to have to come back to do this series with me. And there was nobody better than Ashley Bennington. So, Ashley Bennington is an absolute powerhouse when it comes to business. She is also, just like myself, a business consultant, and she has created multiple different brands and businesses. Ashley's the founder and CEO of By the Blazer, and she is definitely known for her creative consulting and business strategy when it comes to brands, taking them anywhere from between 10K all the way up to $3 million in annual revenue. I will say, in knowing Ashley and all the things that she has done in her life and all the different brands she's been associated with, this girl is a through and through serial entrepreneur. And she started at a young age when she actually hustled her way into managing and consulting roles in Fortune 500 companies all throughout her 20s and is an absolute sales ninja. She is honestly an absolute visionary, and she really knows how to take anyone's idea or concept and help to build that into a multiple six or a seven-figure business. And I have seen her absolutely massively expand and grow within her business, within her brand, her mindset, her leadership. And I so deeply value her opinion and her perspective. And together, we very much do have similar perspectives about business operations and values and the things that really help people to take them to the next level. Not to mention, her delivery is absolutely hilarious and the most direct you're probably ever going to hear from a female business consultant. So, with all that being said, today we are going into a this or that episode, which is really where we're going to present you with a bunch of different concepts and perspectives and decisions that people often make in business and give you our perspective as to which one we choose and, most importantly, why. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Alrighty, you guys, welcome to Ambitious. I'm so psyched for today's guest. As I told you in the intro, this is somebody that happens to be one of my best friends, but also is an absolute comedian when it comes to her delivery and the ways that she talks about business and life, and also is an absolute genius who's been able to scale her business rapidly. And so, Ashley, welcome to Ambitious. Welcome to the show.
It's about damn time, Kate. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Guys, when I messaged Ashley, I said, "Hey, I'd love to have you on Ambitious." She's like, "It's about damn time already. It's about damn time." Honestly,
for so long. I was like, maybe Kate just pretends to like me. I was like, when she asked me, I'll know she actually likes me. So our friendship has been mended once I got
deeper
the
connected.
invite last.
We went to the next level of commitment.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, as a concept in a series for Ambitious, really loved the this or that episode that we just recently did with Lacey Madison. You guys were like, we need another one of this. This was so fun and so entertaining. And also just like really helpful to see the opposing sides on anything when it comes to business, online business, marketing, sales, all those good things. And so really, if I'm going to be totally transparent with you, these are the conversations that Ashley and I have behind the scenes anyways, via text message, Slack message, or when we're in person riffing together. And so frankly, today is basically going to be what we already talk about with just two microphones in front of us. But this or that episode, Ashley, just because I will be totally honest with you guys, we didn't prime Ashley in any way. She can attest we gave her no questions, no context. She knows nothing. And so I said, listen, I'm going to put together a bunch of things that are this or that, and you're going to pick which one you feel that you most resonate with. And then most importantly, why you believe that to be true. And so we're going to get right into the meat of it, if you will. And we're going to start off with one that I think is going to be kind of like, very complimentary to both of us and for our businesses, which is, do you think that it is women's business and men's business, i.e. that there are two totally different ways of doing business? Or do you believe it to be true that there really only is business?
No, I think there's totally a difference. I think that men and women approach business completely different. However, I think my belief around this has shifted a lot about what that actually means in the last year, mostly due to you, because I think that I leaned into what I thought business should be so much of like I molded myself to be what I thought business should be. And then I realized that I really needed to embrace the way that I naturally do business, because that feminine piece of the way that I do business is actually one of my greatest gifts. So I think a year ago, I would have been like, it's just like one way of doing business, and it's shifted so much this year, and I actually feel like I can speak to it. Whereas a year ago, I've been like, I have no fucking clue. So it's definitely shifted this year. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like torn on this one because I think definitely women's business is different in the sense of women have to consider different things when they're doing business. So, like, obviously, if
Yeah.
you're a mom and you have to go on mat leave, it's not the same as the man who
Yeah.
may not have to do that. So, I do think in that regard, I recognize that business has to be done differently as a woman. But I would also curious to hear your standpoint on. I also
Yeah.
feel, at least in my perspective, which was some of my frustrations actually when coming into the online world, was that so many people were marketing women's business as fluff. And, like, I know you're,
Right.
like, a strategy nerd like I am, and so
Hmm.
for me, I got really annoyed at, like, the, like, "Have your sisterhood and, like, come to the retreat and have the wine night and, like, hang with your girlfriends," and I was like, "Listen, like, we do that, like, we're literally seeing each other this weekend to do that exact thing, but on the flip side, we're also like, hey, like, teach me how to build the funnel, teach me how to lead a team, teach me how to do these things." So I think that part to me is where I get frustrated with, like, the quote unquote women's business. I think there's a different way that women need to consider doing business because they have different realities. But I get
Yep.
so frustrated when it's like women want to invest in other women and you can't find somebody. Like, it's so difficult, it feels like, to find someone who's like really tapped into like the masculine strategy.
Yeah, I think that the way that people look at teaching business, we separate it, but not in a healthy way. We separate it based
Mm.
on like traditional kind of gender roles. But what I found in coaching is that men and women, I think, just approach business different. I think that we approach relationships different. I think that we approach the way that we support and mentor and guide different. So I think that there are natural differences, but I think the way that people try to create the divide is really not what people need. And I think that even when I came into the online space, because I came from very sales heavy, masculine businesses, when I came into this space, I was like, what the fuck is this kumbaya thing that keeps happening here? Like, I mean, I definitely think there needs to be a little bit of that. It wasn't until this year I think I appreciated the like sitting down and having a little bit more of that like girl chat, women energy that I think people put too much around. But I think there is a difference. I think the way that people try to create the difference to conform to gender roles is not the way of approaching business. There is kind of that one way of like looking at business, but us as women or men, the way that we look at business, the way that we approach business, I think the priorities we have in business just naturally, because unfortunately the world is divided in a lot of ways. I think there are differences there. So I'm sticking with my answer, but I think you and I are very much on the same page on. I mean, you're right on this one, Kate. Like, you're not wrong on this one, so I'll give you this one. Yeah,
See,
you're
so
right.
basically we're saying the same thing. Yeah, I love it. Okay.
We're saying the same thing. Good,
So
perfect.
basically we're like agreed. Okay. Number two,
Oh my
do
god.
you believe in I feel like I already know your answer, but I wanna give this
I feel like
context
I'm
afterwards.
scared to answer these. Like, I'm gonna answer
Oh,
them
this is the
opposite of
best
what I
part.
think.
This is the best part as a guest. You're like, "What is this question, and what do I wanna say?" And the fact you have to go first is even added layer of pressure. Yeah, she's in the hot seat, you guys. Objection handling. So when you hear an objection, pushing and getting and kind of going through it. So objection handling people, or are you from the thought of if they have an objection, leave them alone, and if they want to invest, they will invest?
Oh no, objection handling. I love handling objections. I'm like a fucking, it's like a game or something. I'm all about it. The thing I do want to say here, though, I feel like there's a disclaimer for everyone. So just please put an Ashley adds disclaimer to every answer that she puts. But I think that there's a way to handle objections to coach them through a buying decision versus like a, oh, I know that I'm going to get the sale every time. And regardless of what they say, like I know that I'm going to push them to buy. I think it's very different. So I very much handle objections, but one of my favorite things to hear from a client after a sales process is they're like, I feel like I came in with no desire to buy, but you and I approach this from such a collaborative lens that I didn't even feel like you were selling me. And I think that's when you can handle objections. I always call it like you come on the same side of the table as the client and you guys come to how you work together to make the decision or to buy the whatever it is. When you do it that way, it doesn't feel like objection handling. So it still is, but it's not necessarily I do not have the moment that they have any concern, I'll just like trust the gods above to bring them to me when they're like self-led and ready. Like that's not my vibe. So yeah, very like strong, very
The
strong.
the gods above will guide them. Well, there is a lot of messaging around that, right? Which, like, we've seen people who are like, "Listen, like, if someone has objections, just take that as a sign that they're not ready," or
Mhm.
that I've seen, like, on the very like for any of these, we really think about these as a spectrum, right? And thinking about the extreme of the one side of like, I'm not going to objection handle. I've seen people who are like, listen, like as soon as someone has an objection, they'll say, well, I'm here. So let me know when you're ready. And I think like objections get a kind of like a bad rap in a way because I think that they're associated with the fact of like pressure and persuasion and taking away agency and all of this stuff from the person that you're talking to. Frankly, for me, I don't think I've had a single investment that I've made in my life, in my business that I haven't had some kind of like, is now the time? Do I have the money? Like, should I do this? Is this safe? Is this smart? Like I've had that moment continuously. And I think, even one of my first investments was like a $20,000 mastermind for my first coach. And so like I was terrified. I was like pooping my pants because I was at the time like a server and I didn't have that kind of money to be
Uh-huh.
spending frivolously like that. And I remember, like I said, like I was so nervous and I'm like, I just don't know if I have the money. I don't know if this is the move. And I remember him saying, like, entrepreneurs see fear and they run toward it and they don't let that be the thing that blocks them from what they want. And truthfully, if you're telling me you want this different life, this is an opportunity for you to operate differently. And only you can decide if you're ready for that challenge to really step into the identity of what you're telling me you want. And if he hadn't said that to me, I wouldn't be here, which means I wouldn't have done the mastermind, which means I wouldn't have had the steps and the kind of evolution that I had. And there's been so many instances where I was terrified in my body of like, is this the right move? Should I do this? And even frankly, and I'm sure even for you, you can speak to this with clients. Like I've had clients who were like, oh, like I'm moving my house this year and I'm getting married. So because of that, like I don't know if now's the time. And I'm like, listen, Sarah, your business is not going to stop just because you're getting married or moving your house. Like, is the business still open for business? And she was like, yes. And I'm like, great. So then all the problems still persist, all the realities still exist. And so if you need to stop
Yeah.
your entire life to build your business, that's a problem in itself, in the sense of like, you have to have nothing going on in order to be able to scale. And so there's
Yeah.
just been so many instances where the objection handling was the catalyst for someone's massive transformation. But I think exactly to what you said, I think it's about how you do it. Because I think the classic like
Yeah.
bro sales approach of just like hammering people until they like basically like controlling them on the call until they buy, obviously no. But I think the thing that I associate with objection handling is like curiosity, like seeking to
Yeah.
understand and also providing reframes for people of their thought process because they're only thinking about an investment or thinking about a decision in the lens of their awareness. And so if you as a coach or as a service provider or whatever it may be, have a level of awareness that they don't have, I feel like it's your responsibility to just provide that with them with that information. What they decide to do with it is up to them. But I think to not
Right.
even try to help them to see things in
Really
a
weird.
different context is like I can't imagine it. I can't fathom just not even like offering that opportunity.
No, I mean, it's the same thing with like when you would go in back to corporate life, like when you go in for an interview. I was thinking about this because I was talking to a client who was kind of in a similar situation where she's like, I feel really frustrated when every single person comes to me with an objection. You always preach, Ashley, if you make really good content, the people will come to you ready to buy. I'm like, well, yes, there's an element of that for sure. But that doesn't mean that people are like, I don't care your price point, 50K, let me sign a check today.
Yeah.
Like, that's just not what happens. It's
Yeah.
the same thing when you go into an interview. When people are asking you questions, it's not just about the fact that you can't answer them. It's the way that you process through information. It's the way that you navigate problems. And I think when you are in a sales process with someone and you take the time to understand them, which a lot of people don't do, and then you also can navigate them on why this is the right fit and how you're going to solve their problem, it creates so much more trust in the beginning. And I had someone who was talking to me the other day and said, when I used to buy, someone would say, hey, like, are you interested? Awesome. Here's the link. Here's the not. But when you come into a situation where someone actually understands like what you're helping them with, how you're going to help them, what their biggest priorities are, and you do that in the sales process, the actual experience of working with them is totally amplified. And when people, and one of my big things in business right now is retention over acquisition. And so if the sales process is not strong, if you don't have that relationship of, hey, things aren't
Mhm.
always going to be right, you're not always going to coming to me totally confident. If you don't create that relationship in the sales process, your actual experience of working with them is going to be fucked. And then on top of that, the ability to ever retain that client long term when you can't spend those first 20, 30 minutes really making sure that they're a right fit and that you've established that you guys can tackle like decisions or questions or hesitations together. Like, I don't I just don't feel like that's the right way to approach business. So I am very much an objection handling person. I do think there is a spectrum. I do think that it can be done in a very effective way or a very kind of gross way. But if you can learn that, it's a skill that will not only impact the relationship with the client, but it actually will completely elevate your ability to scale your business. Like you and I come from sales, and I think we
Yeah.
would both agree that a lot of the reason we scaled as quickly as we did is because we have sales skills, like 1000%.
1,000%. I think it was the number one skill that allowed me in the first, like, 12 months to see anything. Because other than that, I was just, like, throwing stuff at a wall. There's the fact that if I got someone on the phone or in the DMs, I was like, "Okay, cool, like, here we go," because I knew
Yep,
that as soon as, like, someone would tee me up, I would be set to go. And I think
yep,
just something I was thinking of as you were saying that is, like, I think of objection handling as, like, the first opportunity to fight for your client. Because, like, when
yeah,
they come to you, they're telling you what they want, and they're telling you,
yep,
"I want this outcome." And you're like, "Okay, I hear you. You're telling me this is your goal." And then they're like,
yeah,
"Oh, hey, coach, I'm facing resistance." And I'm like, "Oh, well, have fun. Let me know when you're done with it." Like, this is the
right.
first opportunity that I have as someone that I'm going to support to challenge them to their
Hmm.
next level of growth. And at the first
Yep.
opportunity that I have it, I'm saying, "No, I'm gonna let you fall into your old mindset, your old patterns, your own behaviors." And my whole thing too is I don't even care if it's with me. Like, even if I'm gonna objection handle
Right.
you and you go to somebody else, just make the investment. It's not about it being with me. It's about the fact that people are overcoming whatever the resistance is of like, I don't have time. Right now is not the time. I'm gonna wait, all of the resistances that they have. Okay, this this one's gonna be good. Okay, I know this is gonna I'm
About
excited
spending
to get
money
my
or
hands into this one. Okay. High ticket or low ticket?
high ticket, easy. But I want to explain why. Because there's a disclaimer for every answer.
We have
The
just, like,
reason I say
at the bottom of the episode, just notes after every question. Disclaimer,
disclaimer.
disclaimer.
We're gonna put Ashley's question and then she'll talk for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But no, I'm actually very adamant about this one. Now, I will say I'm more adamant about starting high ticket than necessarily you have to maintain high ticket because when you
Mm,
start, you just typically do not have an audience. You typically are needing to trade more time for money, like with one on one or something else. So if you can start with high ticket, that builds the most momentum in the earlier stages of business. I'm like so adamant about this. God, I'm like jacked now about this topic. But it builds you that momentum. Like if you can start with something high ticket and you can really have that relationship with someone, you're going to learn your frameworks quicker. You're going to learn your processes quicker. You're going to be able to be more agile because if you're working one on one, you can pivot the service at any time. You can pivot like what you're doing at any time. You kind of have the most control. And the beginning part of business, one of my biggest frustrations with online business owners is that they try to add structure before momentum. So they add in the website, they add in all the offers, they add in all the different platforms, and then they have no momentum, and then they have this whole garden. I always use this like garden example of all these trees, of all these things in their business that they have to water every day and take care of and make sure the sunlight's on, and it creates exhaustion and burnout from the business owner from day one. So if you can keep
mm.
everything really simple to high ticket kind of one-on-one offer in the beginning, get the momentum there, then you can expand, and then at that point you probably have more of an audience and more clarity on around low ticket offers are typically a lot of times more passive, or they solve more micro problems. You have so much more clarity that then you can really, I think, take off from a like low ticket perspective. I don't think that's 100% always the case, but I think 95% or more, you don't start off with an audience. You don't always start off with clarity about exactly what you're doing or how you're doing it. So the more like agility, the more ability to just create new processes or pivot when you need to. I think high ticket one to one is usually the easiest way to start. So I'm team high ticket. I also think it's easier to sell. And personally, I like working with clients. Shocker to everyone out there. I like working with clients. And so I would
Yeah.
rather have something high ticket where I can really invest my time with someone than just be like,
Mm.
yeah, I have 20 like low ticket sales every day. That just doesn't excite me the same way. Maybe that's crazy, but I'm team high ticket all
Whatever
the
you're
way.
into, girl. Whatever you're into, whatever floats your boat. I mean, you know my answer. I am definitely I live, sleep, and breathe high ticket. Like, I think for me, there's this I like what you said, which is kind of what I was thinking as you were noting it, is like, I think low ticket is width, and I think high ticket is depth. Like, I think for
Yep.
me, that's why I like playing in the high ticket bucket, because I think some people associate the fact that I do high ticket because, like, oh, she just wants to make lots of money, which, like, I mean, not entirely wrong, not entirely wrong. But I also
No,
will say when it comes to high ticket, to me, the high ticket is about the fact that, like, I know when someone invests big, I get to go big and deep into what we're doing together and
Yeah.
our work together. And I've always
Mhm.
struggled with low ticket, not because I don't enjoy selling it or that be, any of the things associated with it. Like, it's fine. I just always struggle with, like, I would get, if I had a course, for example, I would struggle because I would get on a hot seat and I'd be like, okay, let's get behind the scenes of your business. Like, Ashley and I, you guys
Yeah.
behind the scenes riff about this all the time. Like, I remember Ashley being like, I just want to get in these people's businesses. I just want to go and just go behind the curtain and fix things because we're so like invested and deep into wanting to get into the weeds with people because we know that that's where the biggest change or transformation happens. And so
Yeah.
I think for myself, that's why I really resonate with high ticket because I know as soon as someone invests high ticket, I have almost like this permission slip to be able to go and do
Mhm.
that. But I also think that, I agree 100%. I think everyone should be starting with high ticket in some way, shape, or form. And I see people all the time right now trying to start with a course or start with membership. And you can, but it's extremely difficult because you don't have enough cash flow coming into the business to really sustain you and kind of get you up and running. And I think that
Yeah.
when it comes to low ticket, whether it be membership, course, low ticket passive offers, I think it's also really asking yourself, like, is it what the space is doing or is it what you want? And if it's something that you want, then like absolutely go and pursue it. Like I have peers that their entire business is passive. They've never done a high ticket thing ever. But
Mhm.
I think it's because it's their vision. Like they don't desire to talk to a soul. They don't want to have a single Slack message come in. They don't want to have a single Zoom call. Like they
Yeah.
have built the vision and the business around the fact that that's what they value. And so I think also too, if you're going into low ticket and you're going to, do more of a passive type structure, I think it should also be not just from like, oh, this is going to bring me in cash or this is going to bring me in money passively in my sleep. Yes, okay, but like is that the kind of business you want to build? Because you obviously know building
Mhm.
passive and I'm sure people are thinking how is it easier to sell high ticket than it is low ticket, which it's so much easier for me to sell
So much
$90
easier.
offerings, like literally $90 versus 90,000. It is easier for me to sell a $90,000 package than it is for a $90 offer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All the time. All the time.
every time.
People, I think the reason people do low ticket, I mean, I hear it a lot where they're like, "Oh, if I just it's no I swear to God, this is my pet peeve. Please document this in the notes below." This like I'm going to create the no-brainer offer. I think everyone out there right now is like, I'm desperate for sales or like I want sales. They're like, I'm just going to create a no-brainer. And their immediate thing is super low ticket with like obnoxious amount of value. And then no one buys it. They're like, I don't understand. They're like, because the pricing and the value don't make sense. There is a perceived belief around certain pricing. And when you charge a very low amount for something, but try to over deliver in it, people either think that you don't know how to price, they think that it's actually not that valuable, they think that you're going to half ass it, they think it can't really create a lot of momentum or impact in their business
Mhm.
or life or whatever you're supporting them on. There's just that perception. And so when I talk about high ticket, there's just that belief and hopefully obviously the execution on my end that there's going to be a massive amount of impact that's created from that offer. So I think a lot of times people are like, I'm just going to create a no-brainer low ticket offer, and I'm like, good fucking luck. There is, I think, that no-brainer offering, but that doesn't mean it has to be low ticket. And so I think people are defaulting to low ticket and passive because they're like, it's the easiest way to make money. I'm just going to get people to want to just spend money with me. And it's a lot harder to do it that way. You can do it, but you have to have a massive audience and a lot of trust with your audience, or there's just going to be a lot of resistance. And you're also usually going to be calling in because you're trying to promote this like easy, it's only 97, it's this energy is around the
Mhm.
price. And then it feels like a
Mhm.
very transactional relationship. And it is much harder to sell a transactional relationship than a real like relationship built with trust where someone's willing to invest in you and they're also willing to invest in you long term versus like a masterclass or a course or something low ticket. So it can be done, but it has to be done with intention. It also has to be done usually with some type of audience and with a really good understanding of what your transformations are within your offers, or they're just going to fall flat.
Well, this is
Totally.
actually a good segue to the next one, which is course or membership and why.
Well, it depends on what the solution is. I don't think that there's always a, one size fits all. What's nice about a course is you can sell higher ticket. So as being in high ticket, I
Yeah.
think that there is a win with a course. And I think if the course is designed to take you from point A to point B, that's the right fit. I will say, as someone who's launched a membership this year, after last year being like memberships are the devil, I hated memberships because I think you and I have talked about this, they just become this
Mm.
graveyard of bullshit. It's
Yeah.
like let the coach just takes their best trainings and random ass shit and puts it into a membership, and they're like, so much value. And then there's no way to navigate the information. People come in, 4 months later, they cancel. For me, the
Mm.
reason that we created a membership was because my plan was to basically teach it or train in it as if it was kind of a mini mastermind. I mean, I'm in there coaching every single day. It's all around a very specific problem. And the reason it works as a membership, because it's all around social media and content, is because it's an evolving problem. So if you
Mm.
have an area of your business where people are looking for consistent support, but you're not necessarily in a position to be in the weeds of their business, or again, if it's not a business related membership, their personal life or their relationship, whatever kind of transformation you're supporting, then membership, I think overall, I would say is the solution. But I think that there is a place for courses if it works well into your product suite. And maybe there needs to be kind of that passive offering that the client can experience. I'll give you an example is like a new business program. When people are starting a business, they don't always have the time to be on mastermind calls or on coaching calls or in Slack every single day. And so a lot of my revenue in my first year of business was from a new business course, which allowed the client to come in, experience what they need to at a pace that made sense for them, get kind of their like bearings, if you will, to then move into something. And that worked exceptionally well. That would have never worked as a membership because 2 months in, people would be like, I don't have the time. And they need that commitment of like, I already invested in this. So I think it really does depend. But if you're looking for longevity in your business, and you already are selling a lot of high ticket, I think a low ticket membership or a mid ticket membership long term, I think could be like a game changer. So we'll go with membership, although disclaimer, as always, it
Technically, she
depends on the business
accepts both, you
model.
guys. Technically, she accepts
Yeah,
both. I think,
yeah,
I think courses, I mean, I feel like it's a whole other episode between us, but I feel like I have like a bone to pick with passive typically, like you said, like when it comes to like the graveyard of videos. Because I think a
yeah,
course made well, in the sense of like a course that's created effectively. And I've seen this from some peers. I've been behind the curtain of their businesses and I'm like, okay, wow, like this, if you paid $2,000 for this probably should have been $20,000 because the course was so well built out. And so I
mm-hmm.
think courses that are really intentional, that really give you, in the way they're structured, like tactical step by step of how to get the outcome because you don't have support in them, I think is
Mm-hmm.
great because that's certain things that you're doing. Let's just say, like, I'm someone who's like new to YouTube and I want to learn YouTube. Well, maybe I don't want to hire a YouTube coach, but I do want to learn YouTube in some way. And so it's like, great, like from start to finish, if you don't know YouTube by the end of this, you'll have it mastered and you'll be able to do XYZ. Great. Like that makes sense as a course. I think the thing with a membership is that a lot of people, I think, which is where they miss the mark, is they think it's a set it and forget it, which is like, I made these videos, I have this community, and it just sits there. People buy each month, and the videos sit there, and basically, like they show their face for a moment, and that's that. And I was talking to another peer about this because we were saying, like, memberships, it's unfortunate, are getting a bad rap because it's just so many of them are facilitated so poorly. And so then basically people think when they're investing into them that they're all facilitated that way, when really there's so a dime a dozen that people have this bad taste in their mouth, when really there's so many. I even know like yours, and I have other clients that I've been in the membership and I'm like, whoa, like as you said, like this is 10x the value of what you're charging, no question.
Right.
And yet people are like, oh, I don't know if I should. And so I think when it comes to memberships, I think memberships are a smarter model because I do think that it builds monthly recurring revenue for you. It's not necessarily a one-time sale in the sense of like you're selling it for a one-time 997. The thing with
Mm-hmm.
memberships as well is that they are kind of like an evolving thing. Like if you're tuning in with your audience and you're seeing that they need something or you're seeing something happen, the questions they're asking, like that's an opportunity for you to evolve the offer around that. And I also think
Mm-hmm.
the aspect of community is much more of an emphasis, which I think especially right now, I think courses had their moment because it was so information heavy in the sense of like it was all just about who can teach me, who can teach me. But then with AI and with there just being frankly so much good high quality content that's available for free, the leverage point when you're creating something no longer became about the information only. And so I think a membership to me is a great model that allows people to blend information, which they're still technically looking for, but also paired with the community aspect. So like, look, I'll be really honest. I have clients that have courses and like courses still sell. Like there's nothing wrong with a course. I just think that the membership model has a lot of benefits to it that I think long term really lend themselves nicely to a business. Because the other thing I'm also conscious of is if you create a course, does the course have longevity? So for example, if
Right.
I'm going to create, let's just say someone made like like an Instagram course. Well, guess what? That Instagram course is definitely outdated basically every single 6 months because it means that it's very niche specific and it's also trend specific. So I think also if you are making a course, being very conscious of what that topic is, because depending on if that has longevity, it's going to mean it basically becomes like, removed in 2 to 5 years and becomes relevant. And I do think, I was talking to a peer about this. The passive area is going to take a little bit, I would say, of a hit or a little bit of more work from people to stand out because there's so much of it available that the real
Yeah.
difference maker, frankly, and which is why I love like the support that you offer inside of yours and like the way that it's not just a graveyard of resources. The thing that's going to differentiate any passive offer, course, or membership is really the results like happen inside and the community and the connection that's created, i.e., do people feel like it fills them up once they leave that container? And I think that that's the difference maker because otherwise it's just another login that ends up sitting in their email.
1,000%. My best tips for membership and my best tips for course membership, treat it like a mastermind. It's not because it's probably on like a micro part of your business, but like I am in my membership as much as my mastermind, but also because I see this as a long-term solution for my business. Like I know that that's not going to be our biggest income generator or revenue generator this year, but my vision is what that is going to be in 2 years. So I'm focusing on the 2-year vision for that program. And then my best tip for courses, I've done this for every course I've ever done, is I typically run them live, like a program live. Now, some people are gonna be like, I don't want to do that. That's the whole point. I'm doing a course, but I run them live. I work through the tweaks with the clients live. Then I just package up the live calls. And then the other thing I do is when I am running the course, it's set up by week. So even though they can spend as much time in the course as they want, when I used to run courses, it was a 6-week course. So they had specific expectations every week of what they needed to complete it versus like I just have 50, different trainings that I need to navigate through. And our completion rate for our course was over 85%, which most people know the average course has like a 10-15% completion rate. So the fact that we had nearly 90% completion on a passive offer where there was no support, there was no guidance, there was no anything else was really impressive. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback is when the clients came in, they knew what their goals were that week. And then they basically scheduled 6 weeks of like 2 hours of time and then they completed it. So make sure that the completion portion or the way that the setup is for the course is really intentional. And then your memberships, yeah, you have to treat them kind of like they're a high ticket offering, because when people are experiencing that, the way that they then move up to your high ticket offers, the way that then they stay within that program, that's going to be amplified too. So if you do those things exceptionally well, they can both work, just kind of depending on what your goal is for the business.
Well, you just hit on it, which is going to naturally lead into these just so beautifully leading into each other. It's actually quite awesome.
I'm just
Like, look at
literally
she's
here.
on fire, you guys. She's on fire. Delegating delivery. So should someone delegate and remove themselves from delivery, or do you feel that as people scale, they should always in some way, shape, or form be inside their delivery? And by the way, just
I
for
personally,
context for anyone listening, what I mean by delivery is basically like if you have a service, if you have a coaching offer, if you have a program that you should be involved in it in some way, that you shouldn't basically be entirely removed and only seen in videos. So, curiosity being, should you, as you scale, be in delivery, or do you feel that as you scale, it's required to delegate delivery?
I think there is an element of delegation. I think people delegate way too early, which I know is probably, you might actually disagree with me on this one, but I think people, again, they add so much structure when they're in momentum mode that they're like, let me add so much structure. I actually did this at the beginning of the year. Kate knows all about this. I felt like I needed a lot of pieces on like my little chessboard in order to like really be able to succeed and scale. And for me, I actually felt like the things that I loved most about the business, I was trying to delegate, which was not fun. And two, the number one feedback I got from my clients is like, when we hire you, we want you. So for me, I was like, okay, the only things I want to focus on then is marketing and sales, which eventually maybe we'll outsource marketing because we are growing. But sales, I was like, I am working with the client. I want to be in the sales process. And I had a lot of coaches tell me, like, that's not the right way to do it. And the moment I listened to them, my business felt like I was going to fall flat. That was not Kate, by the way. But I think one of the things I really appreciate about Kate, she's like, you can do it if you want to all on your own. There's going to be hurdles, there's going to be bottlenecks. And I think I'm finding some of those. But the best thing I ever did was stay in the delivery and really like optimize that. Again, I've been able to pivot quickly. I know my clients better, my relationships with my clients. So for me, like I am very much like stay in the delivery. Now I think there are businesses though where the coach is in the delivery aspects that they shine in. And as their business needs for the clients expand, aka like team or maybe agency style, or maybe they are looking to expand into the finance realm, where maybe like you as the coach, or again, this is not just coaching, but any business where your kind of elements where you shine in are kind of like dried out and you need kind of that expansion piece, that makes sense then I think to bring in additional pieces for delivery, which is I know something that you do. And I know a lot of people do very well. So for me, that might be like our next phase of business, but we've done over 7 figures and we'll do over 7 figures this year on me being like marketing, sales, support for the business. And then I have a client relations specialist who handle like, admin pieces or moving around calls or anything else. And we do it. And I think we do it really well. So it can be done. You don't need to outsource. You don't need to basically take away all of your revenue in order to scale. I think people do that too quickly because they think that's the only way to do it when they just really need to change their delivery model. So that's my
Yeah.
that's my belief around that. That's like my
I think
like that's
I
what I'm
think
sticking
actually
to.
like I think like being in delivery or delegating it, I kind of feel like I'm mixed bag on this because I do think it depends. I think it depends on the business too. I think, for
Yeah.
example, with service providers or to your note of agencies, I think a lot of agency owners stay in the weeds of the client delivery way too long. And they're like, I'm serving clients, like I'm the one writing their captions or I'm the one overseeing and doing revisions for our team. And, I was just talking to
Yeah.
somebody last week and who has an agency and she was like, I'm the one who's doing feedback on everything. And I was like, okay, well, like you can't grow the agency if you're the one in all the accounts. Like, especially as a service provider, I think it's super tricky to
Mm-hmm.
have you in the delivery. Like, I think that's something that it becomes so non-scalable so quickly. In something more like a
Yeah.
consulting type of frame. And I think this is also kind of going to brand too, because if you're selling yourself, you have to recognize that like you're putting yourself as the product. So then you basically need to ask yourself, well, how am I integrated as the product throughout it? And so the number one thing that I advise people is if you're not in the delivery, you need to market that. So like I hate when I have people come to me and they're like, I felt like it was like a bait and switch. It's like, oh, go, work with so and so. And then like you get in the offer and then you're like, I've never seen her before and I've never talked to her and she has no idea who I am. And so I think
Yeah.
also there's an aspect of like brand, there's an aspect of marketing responsibility to make sure that if you are going to be delegating to somebody on your team and you are going to be having someone else manage the accounts, that like that's something that you're also openly talking about and you're kind of like pre-handling for people coming in. But I think it's inevitable to be able to scale a business. Like you're going to have to take things off of your plate. And I think to Ashley's point, something that we talk about is also recognizing, is there certain parts of the business that you're wanting to stay into in the sense of like you're choosing because it actually fills you up as a CEO, that you're choosing to stay in that
Mm-hmm.
area, not because you're like, "Oh, I have to because the business needs it to scale," but because you're like, "I genuinely enjoy it." And so I think that there is a way to leverage team in a way that allows you to also feel like the clients are being taken care of. They feel excited about it. You feel like you have a scalable role for yourself. Like I do think there's a best of both worlds. I do think it's less about if you delegate it, more a matter of how you delegate it. Because, for example, I had a peer who was talking about bringing in coaches into their program. And these were coaches, frankly, that should have never been working with clients. Like they had no training, in my opinion. Like there was really no credentials on their part. Like they were just like, take someone who's willing to sit in a seat on Zoom for 8 hours a day and we'll like hire somebody for that. And as long as they're willing to do that, we're good to go. And so I was saying, when you're building out a team or when you're building out coaches, it's not something that you can do overnight. Like it's something that requires actually quite a bit, especially in the coaching business side and frankly in an agency or a service provider. It takes a lot of back end delivery structuring, i.e., like brain dumping your principles and how you coach people, brain dumping SOPs of if this situation comes up, here's how we handle it. Like all of the things that you do to facilitate right now to effectively delegate your delivery, we basically have to start with documenting your brain and then
Yeah.
taking that documentation, taking a guinea pig, which is like your first hire, and training them on your processes and your what you've documented and seeing does that work, and you're kind of in it with them before you ever let them go out on their own. And that's what I think I see too much, which is why people have a bad rap about, an agency and I never got to talk to the person, or a coaching program I never got to talk to the person. The reason we have this bad taste in our mouth is not because the model doesn't work, because I've seen people where they do put that time in and it works exceptionally well. It's because people are so quick to scale, like, get it off my plate, get it off my plate, but they don't actually
Yeah.
take the time to really look at what is the process that they're creating. And so the thing that I kind of use as an example when it comes to delivery is like, a scalable business can get to a place where it's like literally like a Starbucks. Like every place and every Starbucks you go to, the drink is made the same way. And that's because it's really been baked down into a formula. It's been made into a step-by-step process or framework. But you have to have that framework. Otherwise, what ends up
Yeah.
happening, which is what many people experience, is you go to one location and it tastes different, and you go to another location and it tastes different. And that's because they're making it differently every time you go. And so if you
Yeah.
want to scale with delegating it and having the delegation not be something that impacts the business, I think it actually comes from documentation before you delegate it. And then again, asking yourself what really fills your bucket. And for both of us, we love to be in delivery because like it excites us in the sense of working with clients and getting into, as we said, the depth with people. So it's then asking yourself, okay, well, for the goals that I have, and then what I have time-wise, what can I allocate to kind of, like, get the best of both worlds? And obviously, it's business to business, but I do think regardless, it all comes down to documentation and being able to really understand, like, what you want your role to be as a CEO within the business.
Well, I've seen the documentation in your business. That's why why you do it very well, Kate. Because it's very true. I remember one of the first times Kate and I ever like were talking about like ClickUp and her organization. I'm like, literally, like Kate's brain, every single piece of her brain is documented. Every single piece of her brain, which is why her team knows every single thing that you're thinking, doing, working on. And again, I think it just goes back to the idea that a lot of people, when they're getting to their business to a certain place, they immediately think like I'm burnt out, so I need support, but sometimes that's not necessarily what you need. You sometimes need to look at the delivery and figure out the gaps in the delivery for yourself before we're bringing someone in. And again, I think there are ways to bring in a team intentionally very early on. But I think so many people just think like eventually my business, I have to have like an entire team running things. And outside of, I think, like typically an agency, if you are all courses, if you are all coaching, I really personally believe you can be a one woman show and scale to $1 million. I've done it. It's possible. It's hard, but I do not think I would be the business owner I am today without doing that and really being in the weeds of my business. Like I know my business. I mean, I literally built my website 18 times. Like I know my business very well.
She really
And
has.
I'm
She
really
really has,
glad I did that. Now bring in a team, I'm so equipped to do that the correct way. So it's all about the approach. I think like anything, there's no like one way or the other, but I think it can be done. And I want people to know that if you want to make $1 million and take home a majority of that because you're a one woman person, like you can absolutely do that if you want to. It's hard, but it's possible.
I was gonna say, it definitely is possible. I would say hitting my first million was not really any large aspect of, like, massive, massive team. Like, I had Kelsey on our team, which shout out Kels was a massive part of me hitting 7 figures, but I think other than, like, the 2 of us, we were basically just, like, a dynamic duo in hitting 7 figures, and then after that, it then started to integrate teams. So I 1,000% agree. I actually do think I also wanna preface, just as Ashley did, like, it's not easy. It's not easy. It's actually quite difficult. In the sense of like not difficult. It's hard work. It's simple, but it's hard work. But it definitely is
Mm-hmm.
possible with a smaller or a more lean team. And that actually, again, beautifully leads into our next one, which is
God, so
do
good.
do you believe that someone needs a big team or a lean team in order to scale?
Lean, baby, lean, lean, lean. I'm a big person. I'm a big person though on lean business. Like if you go to like anything by the Blazer, which is funny because we were talking about like if you're gonna scale, you have to make sure you're from a marketing standpoint. It's so funny that I'm like by the Blazer, but I really am just me. But I'm very much like lean everything. I like to move quick. And I go back to this silly example. I said it once on a coaching call, and now it's like my entire business is this one fucking marketing thing where I'm like, if you have a big freaking outside, you have this big garden, it's all these trees, all these plants, like the more you have to water, the more you have to like make sure the sunlight's perfectly hitting every plant, like the more you have going on, the more gaps that can happen, the more plants are going to die, the more movement that you have to have every single morning, you have to go here and here and here. I like to move quickly, and the more shit that is in my way to move quickly, I have found has just slowed me down in the business, made me more stressed. I feel like I've worked more. It's just not been the right path for me. And again, I think there's ways that you can do it, but I think especially even though $1 million or 2 million or 3 million seems like a lot, when you're thinking about big, big, big companies that are at 20, 30 million a year, It's like
Yeah.
$1 million isn't crazy. $2 million isn't crazy. And if you can do that exceptionally well as a team of one or two, with one or two signature offers, with one or two signature platforms, your ability to scale will be so much more intentional. So I'm always a very like one woman show as long as you can. Keep things really lean. Keep your offer suite lean. Keep your marketing platforms lean. I'm like lean girl all the way, like all the way. I like a piece of cake, but outside
Lean
of
and
that, we
mean,
like to keep
baby.
lean.
Lean and
Keep
mean.
lean. Yeah, I'm very much that way. Like we're running a program next week called $1 Million Signature Offer. Our signature like mastermind has crossed over $1 million of revenue, and we'll do over $1 million of revenue in the next 12 months on its own. And I personally believe that the more offers you have, the more marketing platforms that you have, the more team members you have, again, when it's not intentional or not necessary, it just
Mm,
creates more bottlenecks early on. So the more you can keep things simplified and layer your approach to business, usually the
mhm.
more effectively you'll scale without wanting to burn your business to the ground every 6 months, which is usually a big issue with a lot of business owners. So,
Yeah, I think with the team side, like I do think an aspect of it for sure is vision. Like which is why I think like understanding the vision of your business is so important because if you're somebody that is not excited by having a team, then like you need to build your business around the idea of having a lean team, which means you make decisions in accordance with that. And
yeah.
I think, when it comes to team, and I know you can even speak to this probably in your experience with clients and with your own business
Yeah.
too. And even for myself, I was here as well. I had this aspect I felt before team that I felt like I wasn't like legit if I was doing it on my own. Like I had this like insecurity in a way of like feeling like I wasn't enough or I wasn't doing enough or something along that line. Like I wasn't big enough if it was just me. And so I had this aspect of like, I've got to build this team because the team makes me or having people that like I pay connected to the business means like we're bigger and we're legit or whatever way you want to frame it. And, I realized that there was times where I was kind of just like hiring, as you said, even earlier with delegation, right? I was just hiring to be like, okay, like delegate this and delegate that and delegate this. But I wasn't really thinking about who the players were on the team and then also what were the outcomes that those players were responsible for. And so one of the things that I realized was because I was just like delegate, 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 I kept, getting people on the team who were just really assigned to do a task. Like, I was like, "You do this, and you do this, and you do this." And so I think when I started to then change the perspective to say, "Okay, well, how do I have, like, a little NBA team, if you will, of people behind the scenes that have the ability to really be outcome driven," which means they have the ability to have fluidity in tasks, like, they can do a variety of tasks, but they really are somebody that can take responsibility for an outcome. How do I have that? How do I start to build around that so I'm able to then have less people, but actually able to achieve more? And I 1,000% agree with you that I think people really underestimate how many team members you need to get to a certain mark. Like if you want to get to a 3 or a $5 million business, you don't need to have a team of 15 in order to do that. The only instance where I could see that somebody is going to need more team, which again is why I think it's important for us to understand vision, is something like an agency. Because if someone has a done for you service,
Yep.
and let's just say that you're a social media agency and you have to write captions for people and you have to do the design for people and the video editing for people, there is a general like 101 of an aspect of X amount of hours that's needed to execute. And so you're like, okay, well, we have this many hours, it needs to be fulfilled by somebody, which is true. But there's also other offers that you can add to an agency that are not connected to hiring more people and not connected to having to build out an even bigger team, which again always goes back to vision. And so I think, the idea that you can just never have a team is an option, but all of this still comes
Mhm.
down to big or small team is totally dependent on vision and what you're creating. And so I think
Yeah.
asking yourself even when you're making a vision, do you like to manage people? Do you like to lead and guide and motivate people? Like is that something that you feel excited about? Is that something that you're like if I had 10 people on your team meeting every week, is that something that like gets you excited or you're like, "Oh my god, I'm pulling my hair out." And I will, I'm sure Ashley can speak to this as well. I've had many clients and peers who've gone through this thing where they didn't have a team and then they brought on teams like we're ready, part of my language, we're ready to fucking scale, right? So like, okay, like I'm gonna bring on a team, let's hit the ground fucking running. And then they go and then they're like, nope. And they go back. And so even for myself, I had this. Like I had a lot more people on team than I do now. I basically went
Mhm.
super wide and then I was like, nope. And I went back and I made it even more lean because truth, at least and I feel like we're basically the same wired personality. I had to try it. I had to try it and I had to taste it and I had to be able to know in my brain that I went for it, I didn't like it, and therefore I'm going back to making it lean. Because people being like, "No, you can do it lean, you can do it lean." I'm like, "Yeah, but I wanna see what it's like." Like, it feels fun. It feels like it could be like, that's the vision I want. And it was only once I tasted it that I can close that chapter now and be like, "No, lean team, less people, but more high outcomes, more high performing of the players that we have."
Yeah. It sounds fun, and then you wanna cry every single day, which was me about a year ago. Kate's talking about me, you guys. She's being really nice. She's like, "I've had some
No, I
peers,
have other
you know,
it's
witness
not just Ashley. I
change."
have other peeps. I have
It's
other
not
peeps.
it's not it's definitely not me, because I've had clients the same way. I know you and I've talked about that, because
Yeah.
I think one of the things you said that really, like, resonated me with, it was one of those, like, call out moments where it's like, "Fuck, I did that," was when you talked about, like, this legitimacy of when you have a team. Like, I remember going to my website and it was, like, the About Me page. I was like, I want it to say about us. I want there to be some people
Mm.
underneath me. I want it to look like I'm this business, because especially in this, like, online world, I came from big companies. I worked for Target, I've worked for Amazon, I've worked for Disney. I don't know if any of those sound familiar, but like big companies. And then I'm starting this online business, and people kind of did this, "Oh, that's cool, you're like making money online, or you're an influencer or whatever." And I think I got to this point where I was like, no, if I like have by the blazer with like this team and all these pieces, like I look like I'm important. I look like I have a legitimate business. And I realized that a lot of my actions, and I think we all fall victim to this, a lot of my actions of decisions in the business last year, once I was like hitting seven figures and being like, I want people to take me seriously, or I wanted to start competing at this new level, a lot of that was what I thought other people would validate me with. Like, "Oh, you have a team now, or you have these other pieces, or you have more offers." Or we changed from more coaching to being like, "I'm going to be a firm." And I was like, "I'm going to do done for you stuff." And Kate's like, "Oh, okay, she might be, a little crazy." And I hired like five people. Now, I didn't hire them all full time, but I hired my best friend and an ops team at the time. And I was like, maybe I need co-coaches. And like 4 months in, I'm like, this isn't fun anymore. I don't even like what my business is doing. And I literally pivoted massively my business 3 times this year. We went to a massive firm, then we changed all of our offerings. And then I literally got rid of half of my offerings about 4 weeks ago. And for the first time, I'm like, I don't care if anyone thinks I'm legitimate or not. Like, I'm staying tried and true to the things that I want. And for me, until I hit this point of like, I'm feeling like I'm burnt out and I want other people like hands in the pot, I'm really happy with how I'm doing it. I like that I have one massive signature mastermind. I like that I, am in the weeds with my clients. I like that I don't feel so stiff on like these client deliverables of like, this is what this offer has and this offer. And I can't, but like, I just felt so restricted. And when I added a team earlier than I needed, or because I thought other people wanted that of me, it made me feel
Mm.
like I was in this box, and I genuinely like hated my business. I overthought everything. I was exhausted. I was tracking shit that I didn't need to be. It was just like a mess. And so I think we put value on our businesses based on how other people perceive them. And at the end of the day, like, if my business falls to the wayside and it fails, I want to be like, I got it there, not other people's belief of
Yep.
what my worthiness was because I had a team or not was the reason I got there. And so I think there was a little bit of the imposter syndrome, and also just the piece of, yeah, like, I wanted to test it. I wanted to feel like I was putting things in place because that made me feel like I had the structure that I wanted, when really actually not having structure and having a little bit of that flexibility to kind of pivot when I wanted, that was my gift all along. So I kind of got rid of what my special sauce was to validate what I thought people wanted of me, or what was like the next step. And
Mm.
I was not even like remotely wanting that. So sometimes you have to test it to realize like what you really want. But if your gut is
100%.
not leaning in that direction, don't feel like that's like a step you have to take, because a lot of times you're going to probably pull back from that if it's not something that you're actually really wanting to implement.
Well, and I think it just goes back to the whole principle, right? Of the idea that like scaling can be simple. I think a lot of the times people complicate it because things being complicated makes us feel this aspect of achievement. Like when we make the business really complicated in tracking and data and systems and team and offerings, we're like, look at how complicated my business is and I'm growing it. Like, good for me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
but what if you could also have like one offer and one VA and you could go to like $2 million? Like, what about that? Would that excite you? And so I
Yeah.
think sometimes there's like almost this indirect like dopamine hit that comes with making the business so complicated. This aspect of like the badge of honor of like, I
Yeah.
made it so difficult. Look at all the hard things I'm doing. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, like that's a separate mindset call. But other than that, it's really looking at how can we rewrite what it looks like to scale. And I don't think that necessarily making it more complicated, or frankly, when I see team, it's not always a sign now of achievement to me. I'm like, okay, so great. What I see is you have a lot of cost. Let's talk about what the business looks like. That's what I see now. Because people think,
Mhm.
like, as you were talking about with the About Me page, right? I've heard that so many times. People say, like, I want to have my team featured on there, my team in my videos, my team in my marketing. Because there's this aspect of like, I want to be quote unquote legit. And I'm like, great. What I see is I want my cost. I want my cost. I want my cost. And so I'm like, okay, well, if we're going to increase cost, which I'm fine to do, like I love team. It's you can't like it's very difficult to run entirely on your own forever. Teams need it and
Mhm.
they're a massive part of it. But just simply having people there doesn't necessarily mean that the people are leverageable in your growth. And so I absolutely love the idea of keeping it super, super simple. We're going to change pathways here for a bit in the sense of more into the marketing bucket. So, personal brand or business brand?
Ugh. Well, okay. I I think I want to give a little context here back to my disclaimer of I had a conversation with Kate, I think beginning, maybe I don't even know when it was, because honestly, this year has felt like 15 years long because of how many times I've pivoted because I went to this whole team and did this whole thing at the beginning of the year. But I had this conversation with Kate where I felt like I finally realized that like my belief is not that By the Blazer is forever. Like I don't have to be running By the Blazer for 5 years, 10 years, 20. There's no like, this is my end all be all. And so for that, I want to say personal brand because your personal brand can exist beyond the business. And right now, our biggest currency out there is media and your brand. Like your brand can exist far beyond what a business can. And so I think now if you create a business around the business brand, you can create something that has massive longevity. But a lot of the times, a lot of business owners I see, they are the face of their brand. So therefore, if you have the personal brand, it can fuel the business, but also it allows you to pivot if you decide that the business is not what you want. When I started working with Kate, I had two businesses. I now have one, not because it was not successful. It was incredibly successful. And that's revenue that sometimes I'm like, damn, I really missed that. But my vision was By the Blazer and a personal brand element or something else beyond that, which became a podcast this year. And like now my vision is By the Blazer might be around 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Maybe I eventually do outsource to a team and actually use the brand name and not use myself. But it also might be that I do 5 more years of immense, incredible coaching and I dominate the space and I do what I want to do there. And then I move on to podcasts and I do in person events and I completely pivot. So for me, my personal brand is always going to be the primary focus with the idea that it bleeds into the business brand and that I can, use that in whatever way that I see fit. But I think people are so afraid to say like my vision is not my business forever because it means like it doesn't mean like we're not invested in it when like I give my heart and soul to my business right now, but that doesn't mean that at 40 I still want to be a business consultant running By the Blazer. It might be, but I don't know. So for me, my personal brand is at the forefront of everything I do, knowing that like my goals and my beliefs and my priorities are going to change, but who I am, the community I'm building around myself, like that's something I can take with me regardless of the direction I go. So I would definitely say personal brand. And if you aren't prioritizing that right now as a business owner, I definitely would, because the amount of revenue that I've come from my personal TikTok, my other businesses, everything else, my
Yeah.
podcast, it is insane. So if you aren't focusing on that, I definitely would make that a priority.
Yeah, I mean, I do I 1,000% agree with the personal brand side because I think that the personal brand is something that has the fluidity to just develop in such a massive way. And like if you think about anybody, like if you even think about, for example, like Oprah of anybody, she has a massive personal brand. She can do Martha Stewart, like could do anything. Like she could have a cookbook and she could be in prison. She could do anything. She could be literally doing anything because her business is built around her identity, which then in turn allows her to have fluidity to basically take that trust of her audience and of the people who follow her and shift it into any bucket. And so it could be home and lifestyle and it could be cooking and then it could shift into relationships and then it could shift into health and you would be like, "Okay, here we go," because you're bought into her. So it's always just in connection to what it is that she's doing. Whereas typically when you have a business
Yeah.
brand, when you fall as a business brand into a specific type of bucket, you can't have as much fluidity to shift into something else. So like for example, one of the examples that I often give is like a Tony Robbins or a Jenna Kutcher. Like both of them are going to be brands that have gone into a variety of different buckets in the sense of like have been able to impact people in a lot of different sectors. but that's not where they started. And
Yeah.
that's because it's really that people are bought into them as a person. So they follow the path that they take because they're bought into the person, not the problem that that person was associated with solving. Whereas when you're a business brand, they're
Yeah.
associated with the problem that you're solving. And so the downside, I think, to personal brand obviously is the fact that it is your face. Like you are the quote unquote talent, which means that should you at some
Yeah.
point, to your note, change your mind, and we even often see this, like we're not talking about the online business world. We can also see this, for example, with like musicians, right? Like if you're a musician and like you're the face and you decide you don't want to do music anymore, well then guess what? That's that, right? Like the brand has basically died off because you've decided to leave. So like you were the energy around it. And so even for me, it's similar to yourself. The reason I started to do like, ambitious retreats and ambitious events and ambitious the podcast and like starting to create something that wasn't connected to me and the sense of the fact that it had the ability to take on a life of its own because it wasn't named like the Kate Perkovic show. It was because it allowed me
Yeah.
this pathway to develop that, right? And even when we were creating the offerings, it wasn't like for me, I've always been really conscious of making it us and we and, talking about ITI being the pillar or the umbrella over top of it. And that was because if people understood that there was an umbrella, it meant down the road I have the opportunity to sell the intellectual property of how the coaching and the facilitation is being run and basically hand that off to somebody if they want to step in and put their coaches inside of it. And so all of it is really considered with the long-term vision at play. But I think when you're looking at personal versus business brand, there's obviously what's going to serve you today, which is fine. Even if something you're doing right now serves you just for the next 2 to 5 to 10 to 20 years, and you're like, I know this is not what I'm going to be doing at 60, that's okay as long as you have a conscious awareness of it. I think it's when people are just
Yeah.
kind of like, I'm going to build, and like whatever happens, happens. That's where it gets a little bit sticky because then you end up
Yeah.
building this massive empire in a way that potentially doesn't allow you to exit it or doesn't allow you to shift it in the way that you want for your vision for your life. And then you're kind of like, well, what do I do now? Because I've basically built this whole cage around myself and now I want out.
Yeah.
And so I think
Mhm.
really being conscious of what you're building when it comes to brand and why you're building it is important. But I do think that we've seen this in any industry across the board. Personal brand is so highly leveraged, and it is what allows
Yeah.
people who were relevant like 30 years ago to still remain relevant today. Alrighty. Do you think that video or copy is higher or better, and why?
That's a really good question. I'm gonna stick with my initial gut. It's so funny as you're talking, I'm like, yeah, that's what it is. Like I literally like gravitate towards the answer. I personally believe video. I mean, if you really think about even just like the trends of where things are going, like TikTok is not popping off just because it's like addictive as far as, just the way that the algorithm works. Like people want, I think, feel connection. And I think that just as people are absorbing so much more media, we just do not want to sit and absorb copy the way that we used to, right? Like if you think about it, people used to sit and read more. People used to sit and like read out sales pages. People are selling $100,000 offers from a video now. And so the relationship that you can have or feel when you're watching someone talk or teach or communicate or walk you through a day in their life or whatever, I just think there's so much more power in that that you can't absorb that from just copy. So I would say like
Mhm.
video, my first $1 million was literally made from TikTok. I didn't use Instagram hardly at all. I stand by that.
Yeah.
And I really think it's because I could create a relationship that could not have been created from a sales page. And yeah, I didn't have sales pages, didn't have a website, didn't have a lot of those things. So I would lean into video so heavily, especially the way you can like produce this in so many ways. You can repurpose it in so
Yeah.
many ways. You could pull the copy from it if you really needed to. But video, I think, in my opinion, is king right now. So that's what we're sticking to. I'm ready. I'm like every one of these. I'm like, what's Kate gonna say? Like, is Kate gonna try to like fucking right now? Like, I don't know. But
I
video,
mean,
like
I
1,000.
think okay, so video copy, something I would say as a preface is that I think there is this aspect for multimedia. I think that, I agree, by the way, with video, but I think that people need to be aware that there still are very much a massive community of people who read, in the sense of people
Yeah.
who read books, people who read blogs, people who read the newspaper, read magazines. Like there's still a lot of people who will read at length. They will read your captions. Like when someone says to me, like I had somebody yesterday who was like, I'm not going to write long captions. Nobody reads them. I'm like, says who? Because you don't read them doesn't mean that people in general don't read captions. So I think understanding when it comes to marketing specifically that multi-medium is needed. And what I mean by that is I think that if someone's too heavy on one or the other, it actually is a risk to them and to their business. In the sense of if you're only about copy and you're like, I'm not doing video. If you're only about video and you have no copy, I think that either way you go, there is a risk there because there is a community and a subsection of people that are always going to be people who read or who listen. The reason I say
Yeah.
video is I think that we've seen, our culture in general, even if we think about the online world, I think our culture in general has been that we are consuming video and audio nonstop. We are listening to podcasts in the car or we're listening to music. We are watching Netflix at night to wind down. We are watching YouTube to potentially watch our favorite vlogger or watch information that we're learning. We're watching, like anything really, a lot of it right now to get our attention is coming from audio and video. And so I think because we obviously know that when it comes to marketing is the fastest way to grow with it is to capture attention, I really look at, okay, well, what is currently getting people's attention? And you don't often see people stop in their tracks to read something, right? Like right
Mhm.
now, the main behavior that we see is that people are stopping in their tracks to listen to something or to watch something. And so I would
Yeah.
probably say video because I also do think that there's an aspect of video where you can really translate emotion and tone and all of these things. And it's not that that can't be done. Like obviously we see that with copy. It can be done through books, for example. Like
Yeah.
you can read a book and feel like you're watching it as a movie because it's in such great detail. But again, I think when it comes to
Yeah.
marketing, not enough people go to that depth to really get the detail in the copy that they need to make the person feel like they're watching it and experiencing it. And so because of that, it often lands flat. And so I would say for the path of least resistance for most businesses and brands, I do think if you can go audio and video, it also makes it the most accessible to people to be able, as I said, to like listen at any moment or, watch at any moment and tune in. And I think the best, like if I was to think about like the ideal situation would be a hybrid. And even kind of, to Ashley's point, like in the fact that she blew up her business when she was starting from TikTok, I think, even for TikTok, when I see people doing only talking videos, I'm like, you could also, again, to play to multi-medium, leverage TikTok to have a video going with a ton of text over top of it and having people
Yep.
saving the text for whatever the text says, right? So you're playing to the copy, which is the readers. And then obviously you've got the talking videos for the people who are a little bit more auditory. So I think if you can play to multi-medium, that's always going to be your best bet. But I do think in general, just from what we're seeing, like as a culture, both business and non-business, I do think there's a lot of emphasis when it comes to both audio and video.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to like momentum too. Like my whole thing, especially for newer business owners, and I think you would agree, is like you kind of have to follow the momentum. So what's the easiest to produce? Typically, it's a lot easier to go and film yourself for 2 minutes than to like type out copy and edit copy and do that.
Yeah.
So when I was newer in business, I only did TikTok mostly because that's the only thing I had time for, right? Like I was working 50, 60 hours a week. So if I could do 2 or 3, videos in the 10-minute time that I had before my new meeting, like I could produce that a lot quicker than typing out an Instagram caption and selling there. So I followed the momentum. And then as my business grew, I realized that there was still that gap. So I had the momentum in place and I added more structure with Instagram and emails and everything else. So you kind of have to think about, I always say, approaching business in layers. For me, like video is
Mhm.
like that layer one of, can I grab people's attention? Can I get them activated in a way where they're at least pursuing me? Then I have an easy
Mhm.
sales process in place. I keep things simple there. Then you add more structure once you have the ability to do that. But I will always say, if you can figure out how to articulate value and entice someone to listen to you to the point where they say, I'm interested enough that I'm gonna like figure something out here. Like I'm gonna look into this person, I'm gonna like apply, I'm gonna like, follow them or whatever that kind of that next step for you is in your sales process. If you can do that exceptionally well, then that will build enough momentum where then you can start to, add in the copy, add in email, add in sales pages, add in whatever else you need that
Yeah.
amplify your business to the next level. But if you can figure out video content, especially on a platform like a TikTok, where it's so easy to get in front of so many new people in a matter of like 5-10 minutes, like, man, that can just completely change your business. I am living proof of that. I have a lot of clients, and I know you as well,
Yeah.
living proof of that. Like, that is power that I think some people have really overlooked.
And also, I was gonna say to add to that too, I think it's also a massive skill that needs to be developed. Like, just like people can develop the skill of writing, I do think developing the ability to be able to verbally speak to your mission, your impact, the problem that you solve, I think is massive. It is a massive skill. All right, so this is our last and final one for today, which is and you've
Ready?
you've hosted and you've also attended, so you can speak to both sides of these. Conference or retreat?
I would say retreat as someone who's hosted a conference, not because our conference was not amazing,
Okay.
but I I feel like in the last couple years being a business owner, I have never experienced like loneliness the way that I have, I think, as an entrepreneur. And I'm not saying you cannot achieve massive connection at a conference, because again, I think there's a place for both. And I definitely think conferences can be incredible. I know you've attended both, so I'm so curious about your answer. But there is nothing like sitting in that kumbaya circle with like a couple women or just people who are,
Yeah.
similar to you or experiencing similar things, where you don't necessarily have to have the suit on, or you have to be sitting in a chair, or you have to feel like you're presentable. When you can really just break down those walls
Mm.
and be into some type of group with individuals who can really see you and you can go really deep with them. I
Yeah.
think that that's a space right now that I'm hoping to get into that in the next couple months, next couple years. I know that that's something that you're in as well, Kate. But when you can create that and make that a space that like leaves people with so much emotion and connection to other, I just think there's nothing like that. I really honestly think that any individual that's listening to this right now with a heart to like lead a group of, again, women or just individuals or whatever it is, I think you should like lean into that, because so many people are telling me that they're desiring that right now. And I think conferences, again, I'm like, this is my whole theme of life right now, is like structure and momentum. You can make
Mm.
a retreat exceptional with very little resources. You can bring people together and
Yeah.
have them sit in a room or at a park or whatever and create an immense space. I think conferences, there's a lot more moving parts that, as someone who ran a conference and ran it in the negative, because I'm not perfect and I've had financial mistakes in my business for sure.
Yeah.
I kind of wish that maybe I would have done a retreat first, maybe done a conference second. But like my heart is in retreats right now. I think people need to feel connection. I think people want to be in person and they want to like really go deep with people. And I think that if you don't set up a conference to be able to do that, you can kind of create more of a static, structured energy that doesn't leave with the same impression that a retreat can. So I think
Mm.
small, mid-sized retreats with people where they can stay together, they can eat breakfast together, they can have their hair up in a nasty bun with pimple patches on. Like, there's something about that that just creates connection beyond what I think sometimes conferences can. So I am team retreat right now. Excited to see you at yours this weekend. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to leave just crying my eyes out. I'm so ready for it. But yeah, I'm team retreat. They're both amazing, but team retreat.
Yeah, I mean, I think conferences to me are content, retreats are
Yeah.
connection. And so I think the question then becomes, what are you looking for? Because at least like for me, when I've gone to conferences and I've been to a lot of just different events and different ways that they've been facilitated, I think because again, like there's such a mass amount of people, it can be facilitated like in sense of like you can usually connect with people at your table or connect with people you're in exercises with. But I think generally speaking, conferences allow you, which is why I think they're not as great for connection. They allow you to hide. Like if they're doing an exercise, you can just go to the washroom because it's 120 people in that room and nobody's going to notice. Like if you are somebody who's on your phone and you're texting and you're not paying attention to whatever's happening, nobody's going to notice. Like there really are just so many ways that you can hide. And I think that, the power of a retreat space, like, is the fact that people see you. Like, there's no hiding in those rooms. So, like, once you're in, you're in. And then it's like, okay, well, if everyone's open and they're laying it all on the table, you can't just like sneakily be like, I'm not into this. I'm going to run to the washroom, right? Like, the transformation happens from being witnessed in it and it happens from the shares and it happens from being seen. And as you said, it happens from also, which is kind of what Ashley was insinuating as well, like the aspect of like letting your walls down, not this
Yeah.
aspect of like performance really of being in that room and kind of having the facade up, because really when you're in a conference, in a way, some instances people are sizing each other up of like, who are you and where'd you come from and all of these things. Whereas with a retreat, one of the first things, at least with typically a well facilitated retreat, is getting people to get their walls down as fast as possible, i.e., how do we get people as uncomfortable as we possibly can as fast as possible so that the rest of the retreat, everyone's as open and kind of like, unfiltered and surrendered as much as possible that they could be. And so if it was
Yeah.
me, I would say for the most personal development, most, I think about yourself as a CEO and your mindset and what you're going through, I definitely would say retreat is going to be the suggestion for me. But I think if you're somebody who is looking for like, just teach me tactics. Like, I just want to know a strategy about this and a strategy about that. I think conferences are great. I think it's a great way to network. You get a lot of more people, obviously, in the sense of the volume of people that you can go and meet and connect with. But I think a question when you want to know which one you want to do, even in your own business, is also asking what's the outcome you're looking for. So, like, is the matter of impact and again, width, or is it depth? And I think that there really is that kind of width and depth conversation in anything, right? We can see that in sales, we can see it in conferences, we can see it in marketing, like we were talking about with offers, even, right? Passive, high ticket. And so I think it's constantly coming back to that question of like, what is the intention, whether you're putting it in your business or even if you're going to be somebody who's attending it. And so, even to Ashley's point, like we're hosting a retreat this weekend in Toronto, and we were asking the women, like, what's your number one intention? And yes, of course, like we're going to be teaching strategy and it's like part of the main meat of what we're doing. But there's also this aspect where people are just like, I just need to tap into like each other. I need to tap into the community. I need to tap into like thinking differently and feeling differently. Like I want a state change by the time I leave this. And so you can even hear when people talk about the reason that they're attending it, their goals are often described differently than that of a conference, which is like, I want to learn this funnel. I want to learn, and network with people. The intention around it is different. So therefore the leverage of why we do it is also different. So I would say to me, I think about even for myself attending it, conference is all about content and networking at mass scale. Retreat is about connection and going deep and basically personal transformation and unlocking that paired with a little bit of content.
Yeah. And I even remember when we were planning our conference, the reason I did a conference at the time is that I had a mass network and I was in the finance space. And a lot of women are like, I just want to be around like minded women. And so I was like, conference made sense for me at the time. But one of my favorite parts about the conference, and still to this day, everyone's favorite thing is at the end, we did this like, well, the later part of the night, we did like a bougie pajama party, which I think Kate was very confused about at first. Like I was showing her my pajama collection and she's like, I'm sorry, how much money did you spend on this? Like, first of all, washroom girl. She's over here like, the washroom. And I'm like, pajamas, sparkly clutch, let's do it.
So I
And
I have to just like peel back the curtain here for a second. She told me she was having a luxury pajama party for her event. And I was like, I love that. But like also like, what does that mean? Because she was like, I have these like bougie pajamas. I was like, can I see them? She was like, absolutely. They have like fur. They're stunning. And now I have a pair and I'm very blessed. But I need to give context because I sleep, if I'm going to be very transparent with you guys, I sleep in a men's like triple XL Walmart t-shirt because I don't know why. I literally wore it once and I was like, why would I sleep in anything else? And so now that's what I sleep in. And so then seeing how the other half lives, which is that Ashley sleeps in fur, I was like, wait a second. So then I went to her event and it was so much fun. And everyone was like,
it
they're super
was,
cutesy pajamas. But yeah, it was definitely the moment that I realized that I needed to upgrade my Walmart t-shirt, which
yeah,
don't knock it till you
washroom
try
girl.
it. Don't knock it
Oh,
till you try it.
she's so presentable. She's like, the washroom. And I'm like, over here, like, she's like in this big t-shirt being all preppy and perfect. No, I do not sleep in those, but they're like the sleeper pajamas. Shout out sleeper. I swear to God, I better get a brand deal with them one day because I own like 15 pairs now. But no, they
Yeah.
like rip it. You cannot sleep in those, but they are very cute for events. So we wore this, but we all sat up. The whole point of this was not the pajama, but we all sat up on this stage. I'd done this actually with one of my corporate jobs. They brought up like the 10 best sales rep and people could ask questions. They called it like a fireside chat. It was a really like cool event. And I was like, what if we did that with the speakers? And so I was very blessed that Kate flew all the way from Canada to St. Louis, Missouri, because she is the greatest human of all time. And she flew there. And I had a couple other speakers from St. Louis, and we all basically sat on stage and we were in pajamas. We're just like drinking. We just eaten, like we're, eating ice cream. Like everyone's just sitting and chilling. It felt very comfortable and casual. And
Yeah.
people were asking me about like my relationship with my parents. And they were asking Kate about a lot of personal stuff with her life. And people's like walls broke a little bit. And I think that it was cool to integrate a retreat energy in the midst of a conference, which kind of
Mm-hmm.
left the impression that I wanted of connection and community. But the reason that was, I think, so powerful, especially I think in women, because yes, I do think that women have different needs than men sometimes. But the thing that I think was so powerful is even my friend Casey, who was on stage, who was starting a business, she's like, all these women have had 100K months and I'm sitting here and I don't have a business yet. And she's like, I have so much imposter syndrome there. But she's sitting there and people are still recognizing her as a leader and her experience was still valued. And it didn't matter the amount of money we had made or how much success we had had. I had imposter syndrome sitting next to Kate and I was like, what the fuck? Like Kate's, like up here and I'm like little puny business owner at the time. but we just got to sit and connect and be authentic to each other in a way that I think can't happen sometimes again at that conference level. And so it definitely can be a hybrid. You can create that environment within a bigger environment, but there's a reason that that was such a lasting experience for so many women, because they felt like they really could like get inside our heads and pick our brains in a way that didn't feel like we were on stage and they were not, because they weren't
Yeah.
as valuable or they didn't have the experience to share. I think everyone had something to share. So if you can create that environment, like again, going back to the personal brand, there's so much power in being able to facilitate a space where people leave and they haven't just been expanded from a business perspective or personal standpoint, but they've really felt like they've been able to connect with someone that they can bring with them, you know, into their new chapter, new friends, new relationship, new perspective there. I think that that's just so much power. So I'm so excited for this weekend, and anyone just feeling that like urge to run an event or run a retreat, like do it, because it will change your life. But I think a
Yeah.
lot of people, like there's so much need for that space right now. So if you can facilitate it, there's definitely people that want part of that.
Yeah, and, like, we desire connection more than anything, right? Like, all of us want that, and it's just a matter of who's gonna host the space, and I think also, like, again, knowing that you as the listener have the ability to have that ability and host that party, and then again, to Ashley's point, which I wanted to echo because you mentioned it earlier, it doesn't take a lot to run a retreat. You need a space and you need people. Other than that, you don't need a lot of stuff. I would argue that a conference is much more tactical in the sense of the tech and the schedule, and there's a lot more planning and things that need to be done. But with a retreat, it really is such an intimate space, and because of that, you don't need a lot. So like when it comes to the cost of running a retreat, frankly, your biggest upfront cost is going to be food and an actual space, which is also another reason why I feel like if anyone wants to get started with bringing people together in any type of business, even if you want to host one for your team, is also another way that you can also look at retreats and how to integrate them in sense of your model. So look, I feel like we could go like this for probably 3 hours because we have all of the opinions on all of the things. But if someone wants to tune into your podcast, your social, all the things, where can they find you?
Yeah, okay, we have lots of socials. So my personal accounts, Ashley and Bennington, on Instagram and TikTok. I also have By the Blazer, which is my business, Instagram and TikTok as well. And then I have a podcast called Full Plate of Pasta, because we're a little unconventional around here. So if you want
So
to see
good.
me in really low-rise cups with pasta dripping out of my face, if you are interested in that type of content, then Full Plate of Pasta on TikTok and Instagram. We do business content, personal content, just like lots of different type of stuff if you guys are looking to kind of shake it up a little bit. So just send me a message, just say, hey, I found you from Kate's podcast. Would love to connect with you. And thanks for listening, for anyone who got through that, whatever we've just been talking about.
It was great.
all of our
Honestly,
beliefs.
I
It's
was
been
gonna say
good.
we go on tangents, we go left, right, and center, and it just goes every which way, and it's perfect. It's perfect that way. It's why I like it. Also, by the way, I will say, guys, just to add a little note, because Ashley's too humble. Her content is something that, truthfully, if you were to go to her TikTok, if you were to go to her Instagram, it has probably like a little master's degree of business stuff in her feed. So I highly recommend, if you just want to take a second as you're finishing this up, go open Instagram, go to her socials, and go just like take a little peek through those posts, go through the captions, go through the carousels, because I can tell you, as someone who consumes her content, who knows the behind the scenes of all the things that she teaches people, there's a lot of juicy gems in there. And so you're definitely going to want to go into her feed and kind of take a little peek, because there's a lot of strategy pieces that if you actually executed them, you could probably see traction. Not even probably, you would see traction on your business just by integrating what her marketing tells you to do, let alone what her coaching would tell you to do. So all that to be said, thank you, Ashley, so much for coming on today. It was so fun. And I definitely think at some point we'll have to have you back, because there's just too much to dive into that like, I swear, guys, we literally had a question or had a list of questions about 10 more other things that I didn't even open. So we'll have to circle back. But thank you so much for coming on, kind of thing, and going into all the questions with us. And of course, as always, you guys, we'll see you next week on next week's show. And as always, stay ambitious. We'll see you soon.